Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Dynamic Decisions podcast, where we explore the strategies that drive successful decision making in the world of business. Why? Because the best decisions come from great conversations. I'm your host, Tisha Cable, CEO of C Model Data, and today we have an awesome guest who is a leader revolutionizing healthcare accessibility through innovative technology. His name is Ken. He is the CEO of Health Cloud Corporation and founder and co-chair of Safe Health Systems, Inc. With over 2 decades of entrepreneurial experience spanning from digital media to healthcare innovation, Ken has built a remarkable track record of transforming industries through strategic technology implementation. And welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. I'm looking forward to learning more about you and more about your company. Tell us all about it.
Wonderful. Well, first off, thank you for having me. I appreciate the invite. I really started my career by publishing a small entertainment rag in North Carolina, kind of like Village Voice or LA Weekly, and it grew very quickly. I ended up selling it to Gannett, the people that do USA Today. And during that time, I had been putting on concerts and interviewing music artists, some of which became pretty big during that time, Lenny Kravitz, Dave Matthews Band. And I went and I asked them if I could film their show. I told them I was going to get a series on Fox, which I had no idea how to do. So I ended up taking the money that I made, is about 400 grand, which is, pretty much nothing. But at the time at 19 felt like a ton of money. And I reinvested it in filming 8 different concerts and then some on the road, backstage, on the bus type footage. We used to call it documentary. I guess you'd call it reality today. We packaged it up into half-hour slots. I went around to the advertisers that have been advertising locally and found out where their co-op money was coming from and had them buy regional ads. I then bought infomercial space Friday nights at 12:30 and distributed the 8 episodes. About 2 months later, I got a call from Fox Syndication saying, "Hey, your infomercial got good ratings for the time slot. How would you like us to distribute it?" So that was really kind of the start of my career. I spent my 20s living in New York City, trouncing around the world, filming music artists for the show. We did a lot of music videos and live broadcasts. I became a partner in a creative agency. We did a lot of work for big multinational brands like Estee Lauder, Sephora, Allergan. We helped to launch the Botox line. And then I got into tech towards the end of my 20s. We basically turned the production company into livemusicchannel.com. At the time, you could put .com at the end of anything and raise money. And I ended up exiting from that. I started GTV, which was a predecessor to YouTube. We launched that in 1999, which is about 6 years before YouTube launched. And it became so popular so quickly, we had to take it down after 9 months after burning through about $10 million in bandwidth cost of streaming. We pivoted and acquired a company called Sonark that had a just really rock solid, feature rich enterprise instant messaging platform. We built up a pretty good cachet of enterprise customers like HP, PepsiCo, the Human Genome Project, and even the U.S. Department of Justice used it. This was all pre, cloud services, so companies would install it within their co-located servers. And if you look back at it, and there's still pictures of it online, it was almost identical to Slack. So I had 2 way too early experiences, on my way to where I'm at now. And just to flash forward, exited from that in 2006 and through a kind of strange series of events, wound up in healthcare in 2018 and formed Safe Health Systems, which is a partnership with Mayo Clinic.
Wow. Okay. First of all, wow. What an impressive background. And what I love for our listeners hearing that is it tells you to just keep going. You might be early, you might start something, you might start a wave, but keep those things moving forward because innovation is innovation. So I really appreciate your story for that reason. And I'll give you this one little quick thing. So my dad back in the day he was an impresario of entertainment, and he actually had a company called Triangle Productions, and he sold it to Madison Square Garden. This was a really, really long time ago, like back in the Beatles days back. So just a little bit of knowing you can come. And then by the time he ended his career, he was doing something completely different. So he was also this sort of well-rounded, move around the place person. So thank you for telling that story about how you've successfully transitioned from digital media where you built GTP. And I know you guys reached over 50 million unique viewers when you were doing that. Now you're in healthcare innovation. Tell me a little bit about the strategic insights from your media and technology background that you believe have proven the most valuable in developing your digital health platform, specifically with Mayo Clinic.
Well, I mean, I think it exposed me to the idea of mass marketing. So to build software, regardless of whatever industry it targets, it's pretty useless if you can't, get it out there and in the hands of users. The first step always is you got to create something that people want, that has utility, is a better mousetrap, so to speak. But, once you have that, you now have the hurdle of having to get it in front of the people that would use it or consume it. I think a lot of times in healthcare, companies kind of forget that sort of user acquisition strategy and the marketing that goes into it. And I guess there's really two classes. Are you marketing directly to end user patients, or are you marketing to providers that kind of act as a quasi sales channel and requisition or prescribe it, for their patients? So it was really unique getting into that space. It was the first regulated exposure I had to regulated software. And there's a lot of sort of rigor and, hoops you have to jump through, building out software systems that, are targeting the healthcare medical field.
You're making high stakes decisions all the time, specifically now about healthcare technology implementation. What about when you're making decisions about partnerships? Is there a framework that you use when maybe you don't have all the information, or a framework that you use to make sure that the solutions that you're building can scale globally but maintain clinical excellence and patient safety?
Well, I mean, it's gotten easier, I think, to make global targeted healthcare software, in that there really has been pretty widespread adoption globally to FHIR, FHIR, which is the sort of data standards that most of the EHRs here in the US are using, and I think pretty pervasively worldwide. But that's reduced some of the hurdles, but you also then have different sort of regulations on a sort of territory by territory basis. There is some overlap, quite a bit of overlap, but there are some nuances, and then costs to getting regulatory consultants and other sort of hoops that you have to jump through. Some territories require keeping the data within their borders. So, now with cloud services, that's a lot more feasible to do without just an absolutely massive budget. It still comes with some challenges. I guess in terms of your first question, how do you select partners and make decisions? I think most fundamentally, you have to look at, are your interests aligned, right? I think you have to, looking at game theory, everybody's always going to do what's in their personal self-interest or their corporate self-interest. And if you can find partners who inherently benefit from, sort of dynamics of the partnership, you've got a solid foundation to launch from. So I think otherwise the personalities of the people that are involved, do you get along with them? Would you want to go have a coffee or a beer with this person? As you form partnerships, you're inherently, going to be working with these people, and ultimately, if it's successful, long term. So you kind of want to pick people that you enjoy being around, and I think have common sort of ideologies about whatever area or field that you're working within.
Tell me a little bit about how, so I'm thinking about all of this experience you have, right? I'm blending all of these things together. How do you actually let these diverse experiences inform your approach to designing things, thinking about your solution architecture, for example, especially when you're building systems that need to integrate with existing clinical workflows? How do you think about doing that? What are some of your maybe strategic approaches?
I think that's a great, point that you're bringing up is, now building software is less about writing tons of code, is integrating different, existing components into a tech stack. One of the most important things I'd say up in the, sort of the top three, along with, regulatory compliance and good system architecture, is integrations. And I think starting with a, real plan in terms of how you're going to handle those integrations and sort of reducing the lift for each individual integration is incredibly important. And, we live in a world now, and especially with AI and LLMs, that is really based on data. And, I think these new federated models make, enterprises feel more comfortable, where you're not making copies of their data or moving it. You're just accessing it in a secure, zero trust manner. And being able to process that data also that you're pulling in through API integrations, whether it's into knowledge graphs or being able to chunk and vectorize it so that the LLMs can consume it in a way that mitigates hallucinations and the validity of their output. The other point on that is, there's a lot of people out there, experts in the field, and I agree that the idea of SaaS is had its day, and really you're going to have these models that interact directly with data sources. You're going to see a lot less, sort of web pages and admin consoles and things like that. So integrations are clearly the future, and also how you start having these models interact with each other. And we've been following what Google's doing, and they just A2A and the agent to agent sort of communication framework that's sort of RAG on steroids. And I think that's, that's the future, right? It's like, I'm somebody providing some type of service, or we're entering into some type of partnership, and it's going to be about how do my models talk to your models? And I think that's going to be an interesting progression and something that seems to be moving incredibly fast in comparison to previous technology evolutions.
I think one of the things I'm interested in the agent to agent stuff is in the middle of there, you've got to have how stuff is really done. So where do operations people find their legs in supporting how AI is built? Because you have to understand fundamentally how things actually work in order to train these models to do the work. And then how does authentication from like the large players end up happening? Because that's going to be another critical point is people are going to have to be able to authenticate in order for these agents to really be able to help them to do certain types of tasks. And so that's another one that I think will be an interesting place to see where it goes. I know it's going fast, but I can't wait to see what actually happens. So look, when you're measuring the success of like your connected diagnostics initiatives or Health Cloud's corporate social responsibility efforts, what are the key performance indicators that you focus on to make sure that you're really empowering healthcare access and reducing costs?
I think you got to have really set of buckets that you'd put those KPIs in. I think first and foremost, the end user. So in the case of the connected diagnostics or the healthcare AI platform we're building now, it's how do the end users, in that case, patients, how do they interact with it? What's their consumer sentiment in using it? Is it something that brings kind of joy and delight, accomplishes whatever their objectives are? That they're using it for. So you got to look at KPIs around end users. And both of these businesses are B2B to C, right? So I think you look at the C first, and then second, you've got another sort of large bucket of KPIs around your customer, the enterprise that's implementing, deploying the software, handling integrations. And so I think ease of use in terms of integrations, obviously security, privacy, compliance are all really important within that bucket of your enterprise customers. And then obviously the most important metric is revenue, sales contract.
Is the money.
Yeah, annual contract value, ACV, and then what your user customer acquisition cost is. So both that end user bucket and your enterprise customer bucket, I think one of the key KPIs is customer acquisition cost.
Yeah. What's your crazy metric? The one where your team is like, why does he want to know that?
On the connected diagnostic side, the stuff that we're doing with Safe Health, I knew it was going to be a big lift. When we formed the company, I really thought 5 to 7 years because we're creating a whole new modality of care delivery. We're quite inspired by the decentralization of care delivery. And that's, I think, pretty essential that we move there for a number of reasons, probably the most important of which is cost. It doesn't take a healthcare economist to back of the napkin see how and I heard someone call it the gray tsunami, but when the baby boomers are about to hit that stage of their lives where they consume the vast majority of their healthcare costs, and with the volume of people that are about to hit that and current healthcare costs, it'll completely break the system, maybe bankrupt the country. So we do have a tick to reduce costs, and I think decentralized care in all its forms, ranging from hospital at home all the way just down to telehealth. And I really kind of clearly saw the long pole in the tent in that area being diagnostics. I mean, as pervasive as telehealth has gotten, the fact that it's lacking point of care equivalent reimbursable diagnostics is a real rate limiter, both in the scope of care scenarios that it can service, but it's also forcing providers to prescribe medications without the testing that's part of the general standard of care, at a clinic or doctor's office at a brick and mortar location, just simply not because they want to, but simply because they don't have those capabilities. But that was a really difficult path. It was a a big mountain to push the boulder up, in that it required, a regulatory pathway with the FDA to provide labeling that allowed for both self-collection outside of the point of care, but also use of the results for clinical decision making. It also then requires market access, convincing CMS and the commercial payers that this has value to them, can help reduce costs, can improve patient outcomes. And it's something that we're looking to do at scale. That adds its own set of complexities to it. So I'd say on the connected diagnostic side, the big one for me, because we've pretty much pushed through the regulatory pathway part of it. We had a $12 million contract with the FDA over the past 4 years and worked with them to develop standards and some open technology for a connected diagnostic system as part of the national healthcare infrastructure. And now we're looking to deploy it later this year on some pilots, ultimately to show CMS and the commercial payers the value of reimbursing at home tests as part of medical workflows that can be reimbursed.
You had me at patient outcomes. That's my favorite. No, this is great. Let me just give a quick message to our audience real quick. For our audience, I want you to think about how has technology transformed your own healthcare experiences from telemedicine to digital diagnostics? What innovations do you believe will have the greatest impact on the global healthcare accessibility? Share your thoughts with us on LinkedIn and other social media using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about your leadership. So, as a leader who has successfully founded and scaled multiple technology companies for entertainment ventures, like your work on the mini documentary about Manny Pacquiao, to these cutting edge healthcare platforms, what strategies do you employ to really build up innovation and maintain at the same time corporate responsibility within your teams, especially because you're operating at the intersection of technology and healthcare?
It's kind of a loaded question. I think we're always learning and growing as a leader. It's a lonely job being CEO. So many people want to do it, and then you get into it. And you're like, wow, this is really hard, because you're
Rough stuff, let me tell you.
dealing with a lot of different personalities and people's feelings and all the existential sort of issues that they have going on, issues that are going on personally that you have to put aside and deal with in a sort of rational way. I think first and foremost, it's picking the right people. And I'd always advise to friends that are starting businesses, just measure twice, cut once, really spend that extra time vetting people before you hire them, especially into senior positions. Always structure your contracts with a try before you buy kind of contract to hire basis. So I think picking the right people, that's one of the most important things. I think, putting your corporate doctrine and culture ethos, in writing, even if it's short bullets. And, very famously, you've seen them with Steve Jobs and, other business leaders that, kind of spell out, what the culture is in just simple sort of bullets. I think, that's very helpful. And then, I think it's about trying not to micromanage. And I mean, that's something that I was, just to be transparent, that is constantly challenging for me, because you have, as a founder, this sort of clear vision in your head of how you want things done. And everybody has unique perspectives. And that's why you hire a team, is because you want everybody to have unique perspectives on different things within their area of expertise. So I think one of the challenges to keep senior executives motivated and engaged is, giving them the freedom to make decisions and also make mistakes. And I've run into the challenge before, and have certainly gotten feedback from employees or kind of leadership team at different companies. I've heard, Ken, you parachute in and, try to fix problems before they really start. So passionate about it. And I can sometimes see where paths are leading, but, sometimes it's better to make the mistakes as long as they're not going to be too catastrophic or impactful. Keep your team motivated and let them learn on their own. I'd say that having a son, my son just turned 14 and it's entering the teenage years. And I learned a lot in terms of, how to manage relationships long term. And obviously it's having employees or coworkers and, a son, but there was a lot of correlations, and there was a lot of things that I learned on both sides that were able to be applied to the other. So I think that culture really starts with the founder and everyone that's working there feeling sort of their passion. I think their willingness to put in the extra effort is important. If you expect that extra effort from your employees, but aren't putting it in yourself. And, I know Elon's kind of gone in a different direction in his trajectory pre-alignment with Trump, but And I know a lot of people with the Doge stuff made a lot of people unhappy through some of the decisions he made. But I think he is a business leader that we can learn a lot from. And the fact that that guy was sleeping on the floor of his factory and working 20-hour days for months on end to keep Tesla alive says a lot. Especially for that time, I think he was number 2 richest man in the world or whatever person in the world. That guy could have been on a yacht in south of France. And I mean, he's sleeping on the floor of his factory to preserve the flame of consciousness. I think we can learn a lot as business leaders by that level of dedication. And then you can see how that led to his employees stepping up and being willing to work and make sacrifices, on that level.
Yeah, you do have to lead by example. Super important. And you know what? You're right. Earlier, you made a point. Your kids will humble your leadership real quick. They will humble you real fast, especially as we see the generational shifts. But the kids they will tell you exactly what they think, feel, and mean. And then you end up like, man, how did I not know that? And you're like, oh, I guess when you were younger, you have to remember you humbled your parents too. Hey, this is my favorite thing to do on this podcast, which is it's a decision-making style persona assessment. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, oh, that's good. I like that. Drum roll. All right. I'm going to ask you 4 different questions that represent different decision-making approaches. And after each one, you're going to tell me how much asking the question that way resonates with how you actually approach decision-making. And you're going to do it on a scale of 0 to 100% for each one. However, across all 4, you only get a total of 100%.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think I got that. Okay.
All right. So I'm going to start the first one. Ready? It's called the feeler. It's a mission-driven healthcare leader. This persona prioritizes alignment with core values and social impact, often weighing patient outcomes and global healthcare equity alongside business metrics. When considering new healthcare initiatives or technology partnerships like our collaboration with the Mayo Clinic, I ask myself, does this truly align with our mission to empower access to clinical services and reduce healthcare costs globally? Even if a more profitable solution might generate better short-term results, I need to feel confident that we're building something that will genuinely improve patient outcomes and make healthcare more accessible to underserved populations worldwide.
I would say that would be high. I'd give that a 20% then,
Okay.
I don't want to use it all up on this. I mean, I think you always have to take into account commercial viability, and you can create the greatest thing in the world, but if it's not commercially viable and the government's not willing to just pay for it indefinitely, you need to make a profit in order to make it available to people. I'm personally very mission driven, and I do believe that the mission is more important than the commercial side. And that's not always popular with investors. I'll just throw in a little advice there. Make sure you control the board, all you startups. I think you do need to balance that. And I mean, I would use the 80-20 rule on that if we were fitting this one into a full 100%, because you want to be mission driven, but you need to be able to pay for that mission. So you do have to factor in, how you're going to pay the bills.
Yeah, we always tell people mission equals metrics. So, okay, here we go. Here's your next one. It's called the planner. It's the strategic healthcare visionary. This persona focuses on long-term implications and scalability, always thinking several moves ahead about how healthcare technology will evolve globally. When making strategic decisions about our digital health platform architecture or new market expansion, I ask myself, what are the long-term implications of this choice for how healthcare systems will integrate connected diagnostics over the next decade? I need to map out how regulatory changes, AI advancement, and global healthcare policies will evolve, ensuring that our solutions position healthcare providers for multiple possible futures while maintaining the clinical excellence and accessibility that defines successful healthcare transformation.
In the case of the connected diagnostics, I'd give that one, a 25, in that this was a long range plan. If we would have been thinking short term, I don't think we would have ever got there. It was about lots of different little agile cycles where we were adjusting that strategy, but we had to start, with the goalposts. We needed to know where the North Star was. And that took a lot of thinking and discussions and bringing in a lot of smart folks to try to peer into the future and know where we were going so that we could sort of map out the path there. But I would say, within that is that it's very important to be agile because there's no way you're going to forecast the future as if you had a crystal ball. So there's always going to be changes. There's always going to be unknown unknowns that you have to navigate, on the way there. So I'd say, having that North Star, but being flexible enough and taking an agile approach to each step that you're taking in that direction.
So 25%?
I'd say.
Okay. All right. The next one is called the counter. It's the healthcare innovation challenger. So this persona naturally questions conventional healthcare approaches and looks for disruptive opportunities, often finding breakthrough solutions by challenging industry assumptions. When evaluating healthcare technology solutions or clinical partnerships, I ask myself, what assumptions are we making about how healthcare providers will deliver care and patient access services that might be fundamentally outdated? What is everyone else in the digital health space doing that we should question? Drawing from my experience in media and technology innovation, I tend to dig into why certain healthcare delivery models persist and whether there's a more revolutionary approach that leverages our unique combination of technology expertise and clinical partnerships.
So I'd give that one a 20%. And the reason for that, I think it's incredibly important and what needs to happen to challenge a lot of the assumptions that are driving how healthcare is delivered today. Though there's pretty clear reasons or rationale in a lot of cases for why things are stuck in the status. You've got incumbents that are making a lot of money. Their public companies' stock price and income and sort of viability are all predicated on things staying the way they are. Typically, these larger companies don't have the type of innovation stack that startups have. And you see a lot of times these incumbents really trying to either discredit and or find a way to shelf or otherwise prevent innovation from happening. We had a saying, at Safe Health that was sort of almost a mantra in terms of what our strategy was. And it was arm the incumbents. We don't want to be the insurgency. We want to arm the incumbents. And I think that strategy, while it takes a little bit longer and ultimately is fraught with risk, certainly a lot of demoralizing conversations where you see it so clearly. Any rational person, from a business leader to a lay person, of course, things should be done that way. And you get all kinds of pushback and you have to sit through litany of what you can tell is more excuses than rationale for why they wouldn't want to adopt that or change things from how they're doing them today. So I think that one is important, but I think it's also a little bit lower on the scale than the last two.
And you know what? The status quo is a thing. And the mentality behind it can spread to the people who we're trying to bring into the future too, which is kind of unfortunate. So sometimes the big company mindset happens in little people, which can break innovation too. All right, here's the last one. You ready?
Yep, shoot.
It's called the data driver. It's an evidence-based healthcare decision maker. So this persona relies heavily on clinical data, outcomes, metrics, and concrete evidence to validate technology decisions. Before making important decisions about our connected diagnostics platform, clinical partnerships, or technology investments, I ask myself, what does our clinical outcomes data, patient access metrics, and healthcare cost reduction analytics actually tell us about solution effectiveness across different healthcare systems and patient populations? I want to see concrete evidence on everything from diagnostic accuracy and patient satisfaction to cost savings and clinical workflow improvements that can validate our strategic instincts about where to focus our healthcare innovation efforts for maximum global impact.
So I think that's important in having a feedback loop. I think any system, whether in healthcare or outside, should feed back metrics, and decisions should be in a lot of ways data driven. But I think we can't lose the gut instinct or the vision that helps drive things. And certainly when you're starting, you can use historical data or correlated data, but you might not have exact data around the different use cases that you might be attempting. And a lot of times, innovation by definition is doing things that haven't been done before. So I think, you have to be thoughtful in how you'd correlate similar but not exact sort of data points.
It's a great point.
That's, I think there's an art and a science to doing that. A lot of times startups don't have the budget to go out and get the type of market data that they need to be extracted. But I think there are now a lot of tools that can be built into your applications that provide that level of feedback, both programmatically and now we're constantly poked for feedback. And so we hold on the line after your call to take this survey. So getting a little bit of fatigue with that, but I think those are good ways. Even in the most simplest form, just, showing your app while it's in beta or even alpha to your family and friends to just kind of get their feedback. I guess the last point that I'd say on that is that Steve Jobs famously said, if we would have asked the consumers what they wanted, how to listen to their music with a portable device, they would have said a smaller Walkman. You could ask 1,000 people and not a single one of them would have said the iPod, right? Just because they didn't conceptualize that. Both with enterprise customers and end users or consumers, they don't always know what they want. They don't have the vision to see something that doesn't yet exist. And I constantly run into that. And I mean, with Safe Health, certainly there was a handful of people on the management team that were constantly like, where's your empirical data? How do you know the customer wants that? Let's go out and spend, $500,000 in 6 months asking customers what they want. And I would, say, hey, let's do some of that. But in a lot of cases, I don't think the customers know what they want.
Right. That's right.
I'm going to draw it into, kind of an adjunct subject just quickly, is that even in the sales process, a lot of people go out, try to sell something they think the customer wants. And my technique really is always to explain what you have and the art of what's possible in the context of whatever field that customer might work in, or what their pain points to be, or ways that you think you can improve their workflows, profitability, reduce costs. And what I would say about that one, I'm going to lower that down, I think, to a 15%. And probably bump up the first two by 10% each. I think that might equal 100.
Yeah.
My head's not doing so well with the math right now, but I think that's important, but it's an important sort of secondary step in your evolution of your product. And I would just caution that sometimes putting too much precedence on the data might not always be the full picture, because the data represents what's there today, not what you're building and bringing to market tomorrow.
I love that. And I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's a very important little nuance for business leaders to understand, especially this key concept that your vision sometimes does represent things that haven't been seen in the world, right? That's why startups is a thing, is you're trying to solve for something that hasn't been solved yet. So super key. Hey, so you are 30% feeler, 35% planner, 20% counter, and 15% data driver. Take that back to your team. Awesome. Thank you for doing that with me. That's like my favorite little exercise with folks. But as we wrap up here and we end this, so you've successfully built companies, right? You've been able to transition into healthcare out of the space. If you wanted to give a piece of advice to entrepreneurs and leaders who want to create meaningful impact in the world, what would it be?
I'd read the book Innovation Stack by James McAlvey, who's just an incredibly visionary, smart, insightful guy. It's a fun read because he's a little snarky, and it really defines the concept of entrepreneur, which used to mean sort of like crazy lunatic trying to do something new, and now means just is used too broadly. And most everything that people bring to market is just incremental improvements to things that exist. But if you're trying to create something that is truly new, like he did with Square, like we're trying to do with connected diagnostics, it's challenging. It is really, really, really hard.
Yes.
The follow on to that, and what you'll see in that book, is that it's about tenacity. It's like, it's okay to fail. It's okay to hit dead ends. You're going to, period. And just expect it, so that it kind of reduces the blow day to day of having worked really hard going down this path and then realizing, shit, it's a dead end, right? And now I have to not only double back, but then figure out the next path forward. And I think if you can prepare yourself for that, you have a much better chance at being able to break through and actually accomplish whatever your stated objective is.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. That's incredible insight. Thank you for your expertise, Ken. Thank you for sharing it with us today on the show. It's been really inspirational, because I think when you can balance being good to people and focusing on outcomes for business, I think that's a really good thing. So thank you for sharing that. And would you tell our listeners where they can learn more about you, more about Health Cloud, or more about Safe Health?
You can find us online, and my LinkedIn page is always there. I mean, I'd say anybody that has a good idea or collaboration, I'm always open to different ideas. And I think having diverse inputs is always helps make the magic happen. So
let's go, magic. And to our listeners, I want to thank you for tuning in. Remember, the best decisions come from great conversations. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate it, share it with your network. Let's keep the conversation going on social media using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. And until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep leading with purpose.